welcome to the Caspian Podcast, the podcast of the Caspian Post, with me, Mark Elliott. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Caspian Podcast. Today, Arnold Alahverdian is with me. I hope I said that right. Arnold is an AC Milan fan and a PhD candidate in history, ancient antiquity history, I believe, to do with the Caucasus. He's from Iran originally, of Armenian stock, is now in the diaspora in Los Angeles in California. But what we're most interested to hear about is the fact that you are the co-founder of Bright Garden Voices. Arnold, do tell us what that is and welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mark. So, as you remember, there was this brutal war in 2020 between Armenia and Azerbaijan, sometimes called the second or third Nagorno-Karabakh war, and one of the results and one of the things that happened during the war was, a lot of animosity and toxicity on social media. Not only, of course, it spread from the battlefield to the news, to the social media, and it was a very, bad environment, and it still is to some degree even now, that any discussion between ordinary people would be so, antagonistic, toxic, etc. And
you mean people on both sides, like Armenians and Azerbaijanis talking to one another?
Yes. And whenever someone would try to say something that's more, considerate, objective, or, constructive, in a sense, they would be, there was going to be a lot of backlash, they would be harassed, etc. So, but the thing is, during all this time, these people also found each other, throughout the mess that was online in cyberspace, and in the post-war period, especially me and Aidan Gasimova and Diego Arduan. So we decided, we were one of the people talking to each other, interacting, and we decided, why don't we just maybe do something to, give a space for this, the more constructive alternative voices to this. So
just for people that don't know, so who are the other people that you're talking about?
So Diego Arduan is, he's actually Argentinian. He's not Armenian or Azerbaijani ethnicity or anything. But he has been interested in the Caucasus, etc. Initially he's been active. There is an Armenian community in Buenos Aires, and he has been very active there. So that shifted his interest to Armenia, Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan. So he's very interested in the region. He likes it, etc. And people from both sides both respected and hated him throughout the war and afterwards. So he is a good person to have. I think it was a lot of the initiative was actually based on him. Aidan Gasimova was just an Azerbaijani that is originally from Baku, was in the Netherlands at the time, and yeah, she was one of the constructive voices, and she's not active with us anymore. So now we have Rauf Mamadov take over the organizational, part of the program, which is 3 people, but we have a larger group.
And I just for people who are new to this whole thing, I think one of the things that's astounded me, again, being sort of a bit of an outsider, I travel a lot to Azerbaijan, particularly I've written guidebooks to the place. But one of the things that I until you've been to this region or you interact with the diasporas, I think it's truly amazing to discover that really there is pretty much no communication between the countries. The borders have been closed for 30 years. And although people in the Soviet Union grew up side by side and were very much neighbours and friends, there has been sort of a 30-year gap, hasn't there, where it's almost since the early 1990s, there's been almost each side almost demonizing the other. And I think for listeners that don't realize the degree to which that happens, what you're saying is actually really the fact that you and an Azerbaijani would be even working together would almost be seen as, in some people's book, almost treacherous.
Oh, yes. Yes. People think, I'm the traitor, like Azerbaijanis on the other side think like the Azerbaijanis working in the initiative, they're the traitors. So it's natural, of course.
But I think it's also surprising the degree of feeling. It's natural because you're in it. But I think I think it's worth stressing to people that aren't so familiar with it that this is a very big deal.
In a way, I mean, there have been initiatives and programs, etc. before. In-person meetings, some NGOs, etc., civil society. But in the post-war period, I think immediately, it was just 2 months after. So yeah, we were one of the most active, I think, platforms. And we were just thinking maybe do a Zoom call or two. The aim is to. So in the region, it's like 30 years, 3 decades of no communication. So it's very easy to, dehumanize the other side, etc., etc. Before that, there was a lot of communication, Soviet period, living together, people in the same cities and villages, etc. And throughout the diaspora, of course, it's a whole different story where I am. But the aim was to let's host Zoom meetings. Now it's the pandemic period, right? So people are a little more tech friendly. People know Zoom a little better. People don't do a lot of outdoor activities and hobbies they do outdoors. So they'll be more, they're more interested to tune into things like this. So the aim was to create better understanding, rehumanize people, and give these examples. And these are not some weird people trying to engage in dialogue. It's especially during wartime, there is the antagonistic rhetoric becomes dominant and hegemonic sometimes. So we have to be careful. They don't represent the opinion of the people, and people on the same side, they're sometimes fooled into thinking, to be an Armenian, this is how you have to think, because the antagonistic rhetoric, take hegemony sometimes during conflict. So we wanted to have people see real faces, hear real voices of people engaging in, constructive dialogue or sharing their experiences from the conflict, whether recently, whether 30 years ago, whether anything else in their family or anyone involved. So our aim was just mostly ordinary people. There's other platforms that bring academics, intellectuals more, even though we also bring them and intend to bring more, but to have maybe a more personal, dimension of things.
Right. And so tell people a bit about some of the activities you do. You mentioned that you started off with Zoom calls. And I remember, I think it was possibly the first one where you had lots of people on the screen, and it's and a lot of people talking about the backlash that they had suffered just because they were happy to engage. I've also seen that I think you were doing a lovely interview in very relaxed style in an ice cream parlor in LA with an Azerbaijani lady, and I thought that was lovely. I really liked the sort of sense of the human side. As you say, this seems to be very powerful, and it just helps us to remember it's like two people just chatting, and it would seem the most normal thing. And I think that's wonderful. What would you say of all of the activities that you've done so far that you're most proud of?
I personally think when the meetings where we invited people who had really emotional or this, some of them had angry emotions or just emotional way of thinking about the conflict and given their own personal, experiences, their families' experiences, or the way they were frustrated with the political situation in their country, or etc. So I think giving a voice to them was something, it was satisfactory, in a way, to give them a voice. And especially the second meeting about especially about film and visuals to do with the conflict. That was
which ones? Sorry.
It was about the visual, film and photography to do with the conflict.
Oh, I see. Yes.
We had one on deportations and pogroms. So Azerbaijanis from Armenia proper and Armenians from Azerbaijan. So that was very interesting. We had one recently on Vanyan.
Oh, yes.
Yes, the guests had a lot of really interesting things to say.
Yes, because Vanyan, for people that didn't know, was a long-term fighter for reconciliation, wasn't it? Is that the word? Maybe, again, probably even the exact words we use. Is it reconciliation, or at least understanding, or dialogue, perhaps it would be the word?
I mean, I think a lot of people hope it would lead to reconciliation, but I mean, there's so many steps, I think, in this conflict to get there. But just the confidence to engage, with people from the other side, and then the next step of maybe meeting them, having a more meaningful conversation, and then leads to dialogue, leads to so many steps. But I'm not saying that there are a lot of people that already are totally confident in doing that, and even more. But for the general population.
Again, just for people that didn't know, Vanyan, as I understood it, set up a peace village, as it were, on the border, like in Georgia, so that it was close to both Armenia and Azerbaijan, and it was a sort of a venue and a sort of opportunity place to meet on neutral territory. Do we know? I mean, I'm not sure if that was covered in your meeting. Does that still exist, or are people who worked with Vanyan still carrying on that message?
It was, Tekali is a Azerbaijani village. I think Azerbaijani village in southeastern Georgia. It's close to actually the borders of Armenia and Azerbaijan. So that's why he chose this area. And people describing the way he organized all of this is like, in some ways, they're like, they say they wouldn't be able to do it themselves. They don't know how someone who doesn't know Azerbaijani went and organized everything with a small group of people. And people from Armenia, from Azerbaijan, and from Georgia, they would come there, gather, and they would actually stay in the homes of the ethnic Azerbaijanis there.
Right. Yeah.
And they would they would cook for them, etc., and they would talk about different things. And as far as I know, people with, different opinions, brought their voices there. And spoke to each other.
Well, can you imagine Bright Garden Voices sort of developing a sort of something along those lines, or even sort of working together with that group of people? Or maybe you do already.
Absolutely, we would. We definitely would. Certainly, we want to expand in that direction. At the moment, everything is very online based, but that's definitely in the plans when especially when the pandemic sort of goes down a bit. So we are thinking about doing meetings, in-person meetings, getting ourselves together, because Bright Garden people involved with us are from all these places, Armenia, Azerbaijan, some Georgia, Europe. So doing a in-person meeting would be great, but also if we could organize to bring more people, those are things we consider. We don't have any plans specifically of what to do or how we're going to do anything like that, or if, but yeah.
And now a slightly more difficult question, less pleasant question. What you said that you had backlash on many things. What subjects, or which broadcast, or which issues have you had the most, have caused you the most trouble? I mean, and I think you'd mentioned that there'd been upsurges in attacks. I read something. It's like attacks. I mean, I'm not sure if you mean physical or virtual, but it sounds like even your very modest and very thoughtful efforts are still causing you trouble. So could you talk to us about that a little?
Yeah, unfortunately, the content of the meetings don't matter, because the people who do the attacks mostly don't watch them. They just attack us for engaging in dialogue. Yeah, definitely. It's they don't interact, and it shows. A lot of the people who do, there have been people who actually changed their minds about the initiative after the first or second meeting we had, when they actually watched it and they said, "Oh, you know what? This is not bad." But but being the Armenian, co-founder, and given what happened in the war, the outcome was less favorable for the Armenians. There was a lot of trauma from it, still is. So I get the brunt of the attacks,
Yes.
Especially exactly last year, January, February. I was the one, being called a traitor, harassment online. It doesn't bother me. For some people, it bothers them. But of course, there's more hostile messages that came my way. But it's expected. It's expected. I mean, in this conflict with the discourse, that's
right.
Certainly expected. Yeah.
Do you think it's probably hard to tell because a lot of this is online, but do you perceive there to be generational differences? Is one generation more or less accepting of the need for dialogue and the need for humanizing things?
Yes, the thing is, though, the older generation is not represented. For example, especially not represented on Twitter. A little represented on other online platforms like Facebook, and there are large groups of people, of course, involving older generations talking to each other, Armenians, Azerbaijanis. The older generation is, I think, much less likely to stereotype, etc., in the region. And they also tend to be more passive, I think, most of them, less reactionary. The younger generation tend to be more reactionary, but also a lot of the young people, I've come to contact with in Armenia and Azerbaijan. It makes me so hopeful. There is such a good, vibrant, interesting group of young individuals who want the best for the region and their neighbors, etc. So that makes me hopeful. And I didn't think about this even. I didn't have this idea of these vibrant groups of young people in both countries.
Well, that is encouraging. Yes. Now, the other factor is that I know the diasporas of both countries, but particularly Armenian diaspora, are very powerful forces. And I sometimes think, I know more people from the from the Azerbaijani diaspora, but again, there is this slight sense that the diaspora almost wants to push for more maximalist solutions. And I just wonder whether you get more pushback actually from diaspora than in fact from people in the region, or is that a myth? Am I sort of making that up?
There are diaspora organizations that often do adopt maximalist this is what we have to remember. A lot of the efforts of the organizations in the diaspora, etc., the voices are from the Armenia-Turkey sphere. Yeah. Where there is almost universally accepted that Armenians feel very victimized in that context. And this, becomes transferred over to Armenia, Azerbaijan also. And a lot of the Armenian diaspora is, behind whatever that's, about Armenia, Turkey, they agree with it. And this discourse that's, developed in that context, which one side is, certainly the victim, it transfers to Armenia, Azerbaijan. And so it's hard to break away from that. And, the equation of Azerbaijanis and Turks, etc., and it became even harder with the recent war, with Turkey's involvement. So yeah, the thing is still people. It could be more maximalist sometimes, the rhetoric that comes out. I would say in Armenia, I hear, the people involved in journalism, civil society, there sometimes you see more diverse opinions actually, right, than the diaspora. So that's interesting. And of course, people, it's pay the consequences, but it's not many people go as far as to condemn the diaspora for those views, because
I'm not meaning to do that. I'm just sort of trying to sense it, because again, the question, one of the questions one has, I'm sure we can't really ever answer this because it's so subjective, but the degree to which most, and I think this is kind of what your whole outfit is trying to show, to the large degree, my sense is that normal people on both sides want peace. And it's a little bit frustrating that the politicians and the most vocal people are always pushing seeing the problems. Now, I mean, obviously that's the politician's job, but am I completely barking up the wrong tree there? I mean, the fact you're getting so much pushback, is it from just very vocal people, or are you actually possibly representing a majority that are just normally too scared to speak?
I'm not sure I would say majority. I think a lot of people are passive about the conflict, and one of our co-organizers, Raf Mamadov, was recently in Azerbaijan, and that was his observation. He was talking about Bright Garden, and people were like, it's and of course, to some degree, politicians have to reflect the people's, I think, emotions, etc. But no, I think a good part of the population is still very antagonistic, unfortunately. Okay. Maybe this will, I think, change, and I don't know. I'm not sure if I have the right representation. But
sure.
I think that also the majority of the population want a resolution to it. I think there's a feeling of tiredness about the whole thing, and the old status quo, both on the battlefield and the whole narratives, it has changed. So it's of course it was tragic the way it changed, but it's interesting to see what comes next.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, I mean, talking about diaspora, a lot of people involved with Bright Garden, Armenians and Azerbaijanis, are from the diaspora also. So, but in the countries, whenever there is something nationalistic or charged, that makes the news in the other side, probably not anything else. So you have to be.
And so just to sort of wind it up, what would be your dream, say 3 or 4 years down the road, where in the ideal situation, where do you think Bright Garden, would you like to see Bright Garden going? And how much difference do you think it can make?
So what I would like to see personally, and I'm not speaking on behalf of Bright Garden, but I like to see mass engagement. Like if we, create this platform where people can talk to each other here, there, online, in person, but Armenians together, Azerbaijanis together, anything to do with the conflict. As hearing as many voices, etc. Doing more public events, maybe in person. So, and hearing as many voices as possible.
Right.
Especially voices that usually are not, tend not to be heard of in public. So we want all those voices to be heard. And what I think the impact would be, it's on its own. I mean, in terms of the conflict, well, first of all, each person, if it makes them, it reshapes, their own way of thinking, an alternative voice, etc. When they engage, when they hear something with Bright Garden voices, if it brings them more towards the conciliatory side, I guess, I think that's an achievement on its own for each person. And, each person has connections with an infinite number of people. But in terms of politically changing things in the political sphere, battlefield, etc., it could be minimum, but if there is a political will, then these sort of initiatives, I think, could play a role there, and in shaping that political will, maybe if these narratives also spread a lot, throughout the public, because our brains, work by seeing examples of them. Even you give people numbers, something on a paper, they're like, okay, I don't see them. Where are they? These people who are speaking like this. So if they see like real faces, real voices, real conversations, this is how your imagination is shaped of the public, of your own society. So and a fair, a fair representation of people, but in a way that's probably constructive. But there is, I don't think there's any other alternative. there needs to be communication between the public, no matter how eventually that has an impact. And it does have an impact, maybe if minimum, there has to be public engagement.
Well, anyway, I just think it's wonderful that you're doing that. And as you say, everything starts with small steps. If we can help you at the Caspian Post to spread your message, we'd love to be as much of assistance as we can be. I'm sure we're very much coming at these from slightly different angles, but very much have the same idea. We want peace. We want people to get back together and for people's lives to be better. Anyway, Arnold, thank you so much for spending the time. It's really great to talk to you. And ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to Caspian Podcast. Thank you very much, and do tune in again next time.
Thank you, Mark.